Tell us what happened. What do you think happened with this bridge? And do you think it was the Ukrainians who was responsible for it?
Well, it was the early hours of the morning, and there was a large explosion on a quite a big lorry, a truck, about a 10-tonner, going across the land bridge between Crimea and what is now Russia. It's a vital artery, as you say, built by at the behest of Vladimir Putin by a construction company under one of his best buddies. Immediately after the annexation of Crimea in 2014, opened with great ceremony by President Putin in 2018, fully functional in 2019. So it is symbolic, but it also has a real value. And if this wasn't an act of targeted sabotage, it's pretty darn convenient, isn't it?
Mm.
And when these things have happened in the past, and Ukraine has been quite successful in sabotage operations in Crimea throughout the summer, they only fess up quite a long time later. And some of the things that they have done, for instance, now they're being fingered, the special operations of Ukraine are being fingered for the assassination of Daria Dugina, Alexander Dugin's daughter. And it was said, oh, no, 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 by the Russians, it couldn't possibly have been the Ukrainians. They are very, very active. And I must say, to the alarm of principal allies like the US and the UK, because they don't tell them half of what's going on. We won't know the truth about who was behind the explosion on the bridge, I think, for a week or so still.
Interesting. And Robert, what do you think this means for the consequences for where we are in the conflict right now?
Well, I've been on a lot of Arab TV throughout the day, and you always get they're very susceptible to the official line out of Doha and places like that. They're very susceptible to the line from Moscow. And what I've noticed, and I do quite a few of these Middle East broadcasts, I mean, a dozen or so per week. And I've noticed the official line from Moscow, as has been noted by great authorities like the BBC, Steve Rosenberg, it's become more hysterical as time goes on, in that the allegations are wild, the reference to history are wild, they're pretty mythological, very much in the line of what we saw and heard from Putin himself on the rally of September the 30th, when he, first of all, in grandiloquent style inside the Kremlin, signed away the annexation of these four districts, and then had a sort of what I call a Nuremberg light kind of rally with the flags, the bust-in supporters, to say that this is now sovereign Russia and Russia is really taking on the West. It's very important to read that speech, because very little of that half-hour speech was devoted to Ukraine. A lot
Mm.
of it was devoted to how I hate the West and the way the West hates me, and we've got to stand up to. At one point, he accuses them of being devil worshippers. Now, this may sound fanciful, but Aisha, now appears that he has been doing a lot. We've used the word asymmetric warfare rather casually, but they've gone asymmetric. The most obvious example, and we're still getting the full evidence, but it's pretty clear it probably was a Russian sabotage effort, are the pipelines, the Nord Stream 1 and Nord
Yes.
Stream
Yeah.
2. They've been tracked by numerous agencies, the Danish, Swedish Navy, a P-8 from the US Air Force. But I was at a webinar earlier this week with the Jamestown Foundation, which was founded by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the former Secretary of State. And they had authorities from the region, from the State Department. And there have been about a dozen of these attacks over the past year, including on the main gas switching station on the west coast of Norway. That is why in the UK, they really have to be, I think, more alert than they appear to be about
And
the vulnerability of the offshore platforms in the North Sea.
in
That's a target-rich zone.
Yeah, no, that is a very good and sort of alarming point to make. But just final question to you, Robert. Given that it does feel, as you say, that the rhetoric from Russia and from people carrying the Russian message, and from President Putin is becoming even more hysterical. It does look like Ukraine, is continues to mount this very spirited defense of itself. Do you think we should take seriously any of the threats from Russia and President Putin about using nuclear weapons?
Yes, of course, and we've been told to do that. But what worries me is Putin is a master, although his adroitness. It's like a tennis player going off his stroke. His adroitness has not been very good. His timing has not been very good throughout this crisis. But you have to look at where he's like a conjurer. He's trying to distract.
Mm,
He's trying to turn you away from it. I think we could have trouble in a number of areas. I say infrastructure, and I mean by that pipelines, food distribution centers, communication. He could, though, which is the real unwritten fear, release chemical weapons. And the new commander that he's appointed was a commander in Syria, where he certainly knew, if he didn't connive at the release of chemical weapons like sarin and above all a chlorine gas. And so that's a possibility, because the thing that why I was emphasizing the sense of denial in this almost hysterical tirade that you're now getting from Moscow is that at the moment they're in total denial of the scale of the defeat in
right.
Ukraine, and we now have to call it a defeat. And that, I think, when it sinks home, could have very terrible consequences.